Between sands and prayers, a young Ethiopian defies boundaries for love and faith. Carrying the memories of her mother in a silver pendant, she faces the relentless desert heading towards Jerusalem, where a heart awaits. It is not just a physical journey, but a soul's crossing that challenges impossibilities. The sun rose timidly over the small Ethiopian village where Hana Tesfaye had grown up. At 19, she already carried more memories than many accumulate in decades. Her nimble fingers prepared breakfast at the small community establishment, a ritual she had learned by watching her mother since childhood. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the smell of spices, momentarily transporting her to a time when her mother's voice filled the rooms with psalms sung in Amharic. Hana ran her fingers over the silver pendant hanging from her neck, a simple yet priceless heirloom. This object was her last physical link to the mother who had passed away when she was just 13. The community cafe, once a place of learning alongside her mother, had become her refuge and livelihood. "Daydreaming again?" The voice of Abeba, her 45-year-old aunt, interrupted her thoughts. Abeba was a seamstress, her hands calloused from constant work with needles and fabrics, her face marked by expression lines that deepened when she smiled, which happened often, especially for Hana. After her sister's death, she had taken on the role of mother with unwavering devotion. "I'm just remembering," Hana replied with a gentle smile, continuing to prepare coffee for the first customers of the day. Abeba approached, adjusting the colorful shawl over her shoulders. "Remembering or planning, I saw you putting money under the mattress again," Hana sighed. She couldn't hide anything from her aunt. "Both. Remembering gives me strength for what I plan to do." "Jerusalem," Abeba murmured, not as a question but as a statement. "And Mikhail." The mere mention of that name made Hana's heart race. Mikhail Dista, now 22 years old, had left the village to serve as a deacon at the Ethiopian monastery in Jerusalem. His departure had left a void that the letters exchanged between them only partially filled. Meanwhile, miles away in Jerusalem, Mikhail walked through the stone corridors of the ancient monastery. The morning sun filtered through the narrow windows, creating luminous patterns on the floor. His steps were silent, the result of years of practice and respect for the sacred silence of that space. At 22, Mikhail had a rare discipline for his age. He woke up before dawn for his first prayers, fulfilled his duties with meticulous dedication, and found peace in the structured routine of the monastery. However, when he was alone, his fingers reached for the inner pocket of his robes, where he kept Hana's letters. Her handwriting was like a map to a home he had left behind, but that remained alive in his memories. Every word Hana wrote brought with it the smell of coffee and warm earth, the essence of Ethiopia that he carried in his heart. That morning, after finishing his prayers, Mikhail found a moment of privacy to reread the last letter he had received. Hana wrote about her third visa application being denied, about how she tried to keep hope alive. "If God wills, he will open another door," he had written in response. But when he pronounced those words in his mind, they sounded more like a defense than true conviction. The encounter that changed their lives happened 3 years earlier, during a youth retreat in Gondar. Mikhail had temporarily returned from the capital to assist in a Bible course. Hana, then 16, was working as a kitchen volunteer. On the last night of the retreat, during a hymn in Amharic that spoke of faith and journey, Mikhail noticed a young woman sitting discreetly at the back of the hall. She removed a pendant from her neck to wipe away a tear that had escaped. The object slipped from her fingers, rolling across the wooden floor until it stopped near his feet. "It is beautiful," Mikhail commented as he returned the silver pendant. "It was my mother's," Hana replied, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and pain. "Then keep it not as a memento, but as a direction," he said, words that emerged without prior planning. The next morning, Mikhail helped carry sacks of grain to the kitchen. What was supposed to be a quick assistance turned into a deep conversation. Hana spoke about her mother and how Psalm 121 sustained her faith. "I lift up my eyes to the hills, from where will my help come?" As they said goodbye, they promised to stay in touch. It was not a romantic promise, but a bond of shared faith. He serving in Jerusalem, she working and saving to someday visit him in the Holy City. The first letters were formal, almost shy. Today I served bread to a pilgrim who cried upon touching the stone of the Holy Sepulchre, Mikkel wrote in one of them. Today a customer paid with smiles and I accepted, because bread is also joy, Hannah replied. Gradually, the written words gained depth, revealing feelings that grew despite the distance. On Mikkel's 22nd birthday, Hannah sent a simple but meaningful note. If I ever make it to Jerusalem, I want to thank you. Not for the journey, but for what God is teaching my courage. Mikkel's response came without the usual reservations. Hannah, I don't know the name of what I feel, but it's as if your voice reminds me that faith has a face. Pray for me. I pray, she replied, and I walk. However, the obstacles seemed to grow. The first visa application was denied due to lack of proper documentation. The second, due to insufficient financial resources. The third, without a clear explanation. Each denial was a stone in the path that Hannah was trying to walk. After the third visa denial, Mikkel's letters became less frequent. Not for lack of feeling, but out of a misguided desire to spare both from the pain of prolonged separation. Daughter, don't cross the desert of others barefoot, Abeba advised one night, seeing her niece silently cry over another unsent letter. Hannah wiped away her tears and responded with a sad smile. Aunt, I don't want to cross the desert of others. I want to cross my own. It was that night when the decision took shape in her heart. If the official paths were closed, she would find another way. An old, dangerous, but possible route. Crossing the desert. For weeks, Hannah gathered information discreetly. She saved every penny she could. She prepared a small backpack with essentials, a few clothes, a canteen for water, non-perishable food, her worn-out Bible, and of course, the silver pendant that never left her neck. On the dawn of her departure, she left a letter for Abeba. Dear Aunt, when you read this, I will already be on my way to Jerusalem. Not out of stubbornness, but because I am called. My mother's pendant points there, and so does my heart. I will return, God willing. With love, Hannah. The beginning of the journey was the easiest. Hannah managed to get rides in trucks transporting goods between villages. She slept wherever she could, saving every drop of water, every piece of bread. At night, she read passages from the Bible by the dim light of the moon, recalling the psalms her mother used to sing. When she reached the desert's edge, the reality of her endeavor hit her with full force. Before her lay an ocean of sand, relentless and seemingly endless. The sun scorched her skin, and thirst became a constant companion. On the third day of crossing, when her water supplies were dangerously close to running out, Hannah saw a small caravan in the distance. Summoning her last reserves of strength, she walked toward the group, praying they would not be hostile to a lonely young traveler. Leading the caravan was Ibrahim, a Bedouin of approximately 60 years. His face, marked by sun and time, revealed little of his thoughts. When Hannah approached, he observed her with eyes that seemed to gauge not only her appearance but her essence. Water was all she could say, her dry throat making speech difficult. Without words, Ibrahim handed her a water skin. Hannah drank with gratitude, feeling life return to her dehydrated body. To where? He finally asked, in simple but understandable Amharic. Jerusalem, Hannah replied, holding onto the silver pendant as if it confirmed her destination. Ibrahim gave a slight nod, a gesture that seemed to recognize the blend of faith and madness driving her journey. Difficult path for a young woman alone. I'm not alone, Hannah replied, looking momentarily at the sky. A rare smile appeared on the weathered face of the Bedouin. Come, we travel in the same direction for a few days. In the following days, Hannah learned to survive in the desert. Ibrahim, a man of few words, taught more through actions than explanations. He showed her how to identify plants that stored water, how to protect herself from the scorching sun during the day and the penetrating cold during the night. One of those nights, sitting close to the small campfire, Hannah opened her Bible. The pages turned to the Psalms, and her eyes rested on the verse. The Lord is your keeper, the Lord is your shade at your right hand. The memory of her mother singing those words while preparing breakfast overwhelmed her with an intensity that brought silent tears to her eyes. It was pain and balm simultaneously, the longing that hurt, but also healed by reminding her of the purpose of her journey. At that same moment in Jerusalem, Mikkel was concluding the night prayers at the monastery. Before extinguishing the altar candles, he felt an inexplicable urge. "Lord," he whispered, "if this desire is not vanity, give us a sign that is small but clear." Upon leaving the chapel, he found an Ethiopian pilgrim in the courtyard who had arrived that same day. "Pardon me, brother," said the man in Amharic. "I am seeking information about the monastery, but also about a young woman. I found a caravan in the desert, led by a Bedouin named Ibrahim. With them traveled an Ethiopian girl named Hannah, who carried a silver pendant. She mentioned that she was looking for the Ethiopian monastery." Mikkel's heart raced. "When did you see her?" "3 days ago, near the border." Those words turned Mikkel's prayer into urgency. The request had become direction. 7 days later, Hannah arrived at the gates of Jerusalem. Her sandals were worn, her skin burned by the merciless desert sun, her body exhausted from the journey. Nevertheless, her eyes shone with a mix of relief and expectation as she beheld the golden rooftops of the holy city. Ibrahim had guided her there, showing the way to the Ethiopian monastery before continuing with his caravan. "May your God protect you, young one of faith," were his parting words. Following the Bedouin's instructions, Hannah found her way to the monastery. Upon seeing the small olive tree near the chapel entrance, her legs gave way. She stopped under the tree, pressed her forehead against the silver pendant, and silently gave thanks for having survived the journey. Mikkel, who had spent days alternating between his duties and keeping vigil at the monastery entrance, saw her from the cloister. His heart recognized her even before his eyes confirmed it. He descended the steps with controlled steps, fighting the urge to run in a place of reverence and silence. When he reached near the olive tree, he stopped a few steps away. His eyes filled with tears, he who had learned to discipline every emotion. "Hannah, Mikkel, you walked. I arrived." For a moment, Mikkel wanted to talk about the dangers she had faced, about crossing borders without documents, about the risks of traversing the desert. But Hannah gently raised her hand, interrupting words that had not yet been spoken. "I brought my mother's song here," she said, touching the silver pendant. "Every step in the desert, every thirst, every fear, all of this taught me that faith is not just believing, but walking." In that instant, Mikkel understood that the prayer he had made in the chapel was insignificant compared to the response he had received. There was a greater design at work. An invisible thread that connected the coffee from the Ethiopian village, crossed the desert by Ibrahim's hands, and culminated there, under the olive tree in Jerusalem. They did not embrace immediately. First, they prayed side by side, giving thanks in their native language and in the silences between the words. When the monks' evening chant began to echo through the nearby chapel, Hannah whispered, "If God wanted me to learn what faithfulness on the path is, now I want to learn what it means to remain by his side." Mikkel, with the firm voice he used for sacred readings, replied, "Then I promise to serve, not only at the altar but to the love he entrusted to us." The following months brought different challenges. With the support of the local Christian community and the monks of the monastery, Hannah managed to regularize her situation. She found work at a nearby bakery, where her knowledge of food preparation was valued. The bread she baked filled the narrow alley with aromas that reminded all the pilgrims of daily sustenance, both physical and spiritual. In the mornings, before going to the bakery, Hannah helped light the chapel candles. At night, she studied the local language and scriptures with the same determination that had brought her through the desert. Mikkel continued his service as a deacon, now with a renewed purpose. With the blessing of the monastery's superiors, he and Hannah got engaged in a simple ceremony, held under the same olive tree where they had reunited. The celebration was modest. Fresh bread, coffee prepared in the Ethiopian style, and the reading of Psalm 121, which meant so much to both of them. They did not become legendary figures, nor did they seek recognition. Their story, however, became a whisper among pilgrims. The young woman who crossed the desert for love and faith, the deacon who learned that serving God included honoring the feelings he planted in his heart. Together, they created a small tradition, offering fresh water to newly arrived travelers, especially those who appeared exhausted and thirsty. A silent tribute to Ibrahim and the mercy found in the desert. Hannah still carried the pain of her mother's absence, not as a weight that immobilized her, but as a root that sustained her. Sometimes, when the wind blew through the monastery courtyard, she would softly sing the psalms she had learned in childhood. Mikhail, upon hearing her, would smile in recognition of that melody, which represented the thread of divine providence in their lives. If someone asked them how they had reached that point, they would share their story with humility, without romanticizing the dangers faced, but also without hiding the joy of what they had learned. That faith is not a shortcut to avoiding difficulties, but the path that sustains us through them. Love, when grounded in the Word, Mikhail would say to the young novices, does not seek spectacular signs, but recognizes with gratitude the small miracles of everyday life. And so they continued, side by side, serving the community and cultivating daily the certainty that the encounter between the courage of a young woman and the prayer of a man had been orchestrated by the heavens, not to create an extraordinary story, but to remind everyone that faith has feet to walk, hands to serve, and a heart to love, even through the desert.